Call the meeting to order. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Call the roll, please.
Anthony Caldwell, Laura Grauman, Donald Johnson, Bruce McCracken.
Here.
Alan Rich.
Here.
Robert Shepard. Gary Rosenthal asked to be excused. Joel Reese.
Here.
Cheryl Bethia. Here. Cheryl Bagallo. Here. And Robert Thomas.
Here. Okay, we have nothing. I think this is still the same. There's nothing, we can go right into hearings. There's
Yes,
no
we can.
resolutions or anything. Moving down, we're changing the order slightly. The first hearing is going to be Milong Jiang, ZBA 19-00011. This applicant seeks certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use relating to the existence of three-family dwelling and the existence of two dwellings on the same lot at 121 Victor Street, Somerset, Block 145, lots 25, 26, in the HBD zone.
Grab the mic, please, and speak right into it.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Eric Goldberg of the firm of Stark & Stark, here tonight on behalf of the applicant. We have a total of probably 3 witnesses tonight. We have a fourth if additional testimony is needed. As had been mentioned by the chair, this is a request for a certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use. Subject property is located at 121 Victor Street. It's also known as Block 145, lots 25 and 26. There are 2 existing houses that straddle both of those lots. One of those has been used as a single-family home, the other as multifamily for 3 families. The key date in this is October 1959. That's the date of the zoning ordinance. Our first witness tonight is someone who has basically had her grandparents own the property from 1944 through 2002. She will testify that she can recall the property being used as a single-family home, one of the units, and then also as a 3-family multifamily dwelling from the time she was a child prior to 1959 up through 2002 when the property was sold. It was initially used for members of the Russian Orthodox Church. As demographics changed in the probably late 1980s, maybe early 1990, the property was really rented out to members of the Greek Orthodox Church. In approximately 2002, the property was sold to Pastor Johnny Meyer's congregation, and he's going to be the second witness to testify. He will also testify that during his ownership of the property from 2002 to 2018, the property was used as a single-family home as well as a 3-family multifamily home. So the use has been continuous, and the use predated the zoning ordinance and was never abandoned. We also have a third witness, an architect, who will basically just describe what the dimensions are of the 3-family multifamily dwelling and what the intent is to do, and that it's going to be rehabbed and improved. That's not necessarily that relevant for tonight, but just to give the board a flavor as to what the applicant hopes to accomplish. If the board has any questions, we'll certainly entertain them. Otherwise, we can start with our 3 witnesses.
Right ahead.
Terrific. I don't know if you want to swear all the witnesses in simultaneously.
We can do them one at a time.
Okay. Natalie, if you could, please.
Ma'am, can you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
Natalie Zenkert, 21 Holland Lane, Colts Neck, New Jersey.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Z like in zebra, Enkert.
Thank you.
Natalie, if you could, please describe for the board how you're familiar with 121 Victor Street, the subject property of this application.
That property belonged to my grandparents, the Reverend Gabriel Matz and his wife Anna Matz. The name had been shortened. It originally was Matzievsky, but it had been shortened years ago.
Okay. And did your grandparents, in one form or another, own the property from as long as you can remember until about 2002 when it was sold?
Yes,
Okay. And you were born in 1944, not that I usually ask a witness their birth
was.
date, but for purposes of this, it's actually relevant. And it's relevant in the sense of, if you could just describe for the board your recollections as a child and how you can remember prior to 1959 your familiarity with the property.
I never actually lived on the property. There were other family members that did live on the property at different times. But we would go to visit, obviously. My grandparents go to church there on occasion. And just grew up and played there. Before these beautiful townhouses, I guess they're called, that are there now across the street, there was low ranch-style housing. I think it was senior or disability, or I'm not sure what all the purposes of it was. And before that, it was open fields, and that's where we played when we were kids. I can also remember my cousin Jonathan was born. My aunt was living in the single-family home in the back. When she was pregnant with him, we had gone to visit, and she was pregnant and having difficulty with the pregnancy, and that was before Jonathan was born. And Jonathan have all of his paperwork. He's like in his 60s now, I think.
He is. And is it fair to say that certainly prior to 1959, specifically October of 1959, the property was used as a single-family home for one of the homes and a three-family multi-tenant dwelling on the other building?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and you can certainly recall that because as a child...
It was there. As I said, my cousin was born when my aunt was carrying him when they lived in the single-family house in the back. As far as I can remember, it's always been there.
And you remember that certainly prior to 1959?
Yes.
Okay. And it was used initially for members of the Russian Orthodox congregation until about probably the late 1980s or so?
My grandfather passed away, I believe it was 1982. Yeah. And then at that point, or some time shortly after that, a Greek parish, originally from New York, wanted to use the church as an outreach for Greek people that were in the area. And then Rutgers used it as an outreach for Orthodox students that attended Rutgers University because of the proximity to the university.
And when you're talking about the church is really adjacent to this property?
Correct.
Okay. And during the period, you're basically talking about a almost 60-year period that you're familiar with this property. It was always continuously used as such for the one single family and the one three-family multifamily dwelling.
I can tell you a little bit more than 60 years because you all know my birth date now. So.
Yes. I have no other questions of this witness.
I have none. Anybody?
Just one technical clarification. I think the date is October 1958 as opposed to 59,
Oh, okay.
just to make sure the record's clear.
And just to make it clear then, you can certainly testify that prior to October 1958, the property was used as a single-family dwelling and also one three-family multifamily dwelling.
Yes,
Okay, and all your testimony is the same regardless of 58 or 59?
all the same.
Okay.
It's all the same.
Sounds like she has a good memory.
Yes.
Thank God.
I can barely
I
tell
can
you what...
remember using the pump. I don't know if it's still there. There was a well.
Yeah.
And so we would pump the water because when there would be, the great aunts would come, they would get me a glass of water. So you go when you pump the well. I don't know if it's still, hope it is. I don't know if it's still usable. But fond memories, very fond memories of the area.
Hey, thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Natalie. Esther?
Could you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand?
I don't swear.
That's perfectly acceptable. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes, yes, I do.
Thank you. Your name and address, please?
Pastor Johnny Myers, 26 Hunt Road, Somerset, New Jersey. Pastor Johnny Myers, 26 Hunt Road, Somerset, New Jersey.
Thank you. Could you spell your last name for me, please?
Yes, Myers.
Thank you.
And Pastor Myers, if you could, tell the board the name of your congregation.
Full Gospel Temple of Praise.
And did this congregation purchase the subject property in 2002?
Yes,
Okay. And from 2002 until you sold the property in 2018, was the property continuously used as a single-family home and also a three-family multi-tenant dwelling?
yes. When we purchased the property in 2002, there were tenants that were there before we got there. Mr. George lived in that lower basement, lower level apartment. Then we had Mr. Alex Washington, which his grandmother lived across the street in those buildings that Miss Natalie had just described. And we had another family living in the smaller house. I think she was Greek. She lived in that back smaller house. So we've had people there ever since we've been there. We've had Section 8. There's always been people in those houses.
And Akibi, during the 16-year or so period of ownership by your congregation, it's always continuously been used for the aforementioned uses.
Yes.
Okay. I have no additional questions.
Anyone?
Okay. At this point in time, I believe we have established that the property has been used prior to October 1958 and has continuously, without abandonment, been used for the single-family and multifamily dwellings that we've talked about. We have one additional witness, basically just to describe what is there in terms of the dimensions and also what is hoped to be done. I'm not sure it's necessarily legally relevant, but if the board wants to hear it, certainly we have that testimony.
Hey, we have in the packet tax record. From your point of view, if we were to consider approving this, do we need any other legal proofs?
No, if you believe that the applicant has established that this use existed prior to 1958 and has continued more or less exclusively up to the present time, that is what the applicant needs to prove his case.
Anyone who wants any more evidence?
Mr. Chairman, just to note as well, the applicant submitted, along with the testimony tonight, obviously, some affidavits that basically matched the testimony that was provided tonight. There are some additional exhibits showing some, I mean, it doesn't go back as far as 1958, but going back to 1990, some drawings of the three units in the front building, stamped from fire prevention, some tax information, et cetera, which maybe by themselves don't necessarily prove it, but certainly I think add to the testimony that was provided.
Sure. And Mark, I don't know if you or the chair wants me to go into that. I know that's already part of the record as it was
Here's what
submitted.
we're going to do. To make this efficient, I'm going to open to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to speak or ask a question concerning this application? Then we'll close to the public. Is there a board member who wants to make a motion?
I move that we accept the application for this property being, it's what do they call it, prior to the zoning ordinance in
Yeah,
1958.
it's a pre-existing non-conforming use.
pre-existing non-conforming use.
Second. Word.
Bruce McCracken,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Joel Reese, Cheryl Bethia,
Yes.
Cheryl Begallo,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Yes. It isn't always this easy, but I think the board believes you have two credible witnesses and all your written material is consistent with the testimony, which we haven't had always in some types of applications like this. There's no need to
And that's why I was
keep us
asking.
all out and whatever. Good luck with it. Congratulations.
Great. Thank you very much.
Did we decide Mattson next, right?
Really whatever.
I have the old agenda, didn't have you.
Engel Berman's next.
Okay, Engel Berman.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't read the entire paragraph, but Engel Berman, Somerset, ZBA's 18-00006. It's for lot subdivision in a previously approved project.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Actually, the application that we submitted was a two-part application. One part of it was a technical major subdivision, and the second part of it was the site plan. If the board recalls, when we came here a couple years ago, we had a minor subdivision to create 3 lots, and we received site plan approval for 2 of the lots, one being the Bristol Assisted Living Facility and the other facility being a hotel. The Bristol is currently under construction. We then had a pad site for a third user, which had not been defined at that time. We did submit an application for site plan approval for that user and a use variance, which is a quick check. That was supposed to be on this evening. However, we are still working through things with the Historic Commission and with the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission, so I don't believe the application was ready to be presented to you this evening. So we're asking that that part of the application, the site plan, be carried to your meeting, your second meeting in June, and I got to get the date. I think it was. So I would request that that matter be carried to June 20th without any further notice. And then we are here tonight for a minor or technical major subdivision to create 2 lots from a lot which is a detention basin lot on World's Fair Drive to create a new access into the site which was the old hotel, which is now the new hotel, the assisted living, and hopefully the quick check. I will have Mr. Ardman sworn in, and he'll review everything with you and sort of give you a pretty picture of what was done and where we're going.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your name and address, please.
First initial F, Mitchell Ardman, 575 Route 28, Raritan, New Jersey.
Spell your last name, please.
Ardman.
Thank you.
Mr. Ardman, you heard my opening comments concerning this application and the prior applications.
Yes, I did.
And you were qualified in all of the prior applications as both a professional planner and also as a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey.
That's correct.
And we accept that. I assume that almost a continuation.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Mr. Ardman, you have an exhibit that you're going to rely on in presenting your testimony?
Yes, I do.
All right, can we have that marked as A1, and can you describe what that exhibit is?
The exhibit here is twisted a little bit. It's still cockeyed. This is the final plat that was submitted to you, and we've just colored it so that they jump out at you so you can see the split of the subdivision that we're proposing.
Okay, and does the exhibit also reference back to the other lots that were previously approved?
Yes, they're around, and I'll show you some additional too, but just to orient the board, World's Fair Drive at the bottom, which is the south, north is up here. The Easton Avenue is on the right side. The ramp coming off at 287, so 287 is to the north, with the exit ramp coming to the right on the plan or to the east of the property here.
Okay. And the lot that is in green, the larger lot, is the lot that was approved previously for a hotel?
That's correct.
And what is the current lot number of that lot?
That one is 26.02.
All right. And that lot had no frontage, correct? It was an interior lot with absolutely no frontage.
That's correct. There are cross easements between the other lots that have access. The access, as many of you are aware, is the driveway that's off of Easton Avenue that has always historically swung onto the property. That was going to be the continued access.
Okay. And previously, when the site was a hotel, there was also another method of ingress and egress, which was through an easement through a site which now houses a medical office. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's at the corner of here of Easton Avenue and World's Fair. That easement is actually shown on the map here.
Okay. And when we started to develop this site and had meetings with the township staff suggested that we look at an additional alternate method of ingress and egress for the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the lot that we are going to now obtain the access through is an existing detention basin lot?
That's correct. Lot 4.01, that services a good portion of the World's Fair development.
Okay. And that lot is owned by First Industrial?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you indicate to the board how the subdivision will work?
Certainly. So we have dashed out the red dash circling the green portion is the subdivision. So the existing lot, which is the detention basin, is approximately 2.28 acres. Of that, we're going to swap out about 0.429 acres to attach it to the existing lot. That'll create the entrance drive. What I would like to do, because I know this is kind of in a vacuum for everybody, you just see, technically we're just here for a plat, but so it makes a little more sense. What I did, take the overall site plan, which will be part of the next application. I can mark this as well.
Please.
Me too. Is the overall plan, sheet 2, which was part of, which would be the quick check, but basically an overall plan. Again, World's Fair at the bottom, Easton Avenue on the right, same orientation. The blue outline here is the detention basin on World's Fair. As was discussed, the previously approved hotel I'm pointing to, outlined in green. So that's the property that the driveway will be connected to. Also previously approved is the Bristol Care Center. That's the brown building in the northwest corner of the lot. And what will be before you shortly, as Peter mentioned, is the quick check coming off of the pad site, if you will, facing to Easton Avenue. So you can see the existing driveway as it comes into the site, and this is where it'll afford a secondary access out to World Fair Drive.
Okay. And that will be a full access both in and out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as part of the previous approval, the access that was the easement through the medical office is going to be closed off with a gate.
Bollard and chain.
Okay. And as part of that approval, that is only going to be an emergency access for fire or police. Is that correct?
Yeah, that actually is going to be contingent on the quick check
Right.
part of the application. But yeah, so we met with fire and police, and they want to still be able to have that. That's hence the bollard and chain, but there will be no daily access through that drive.
Okay. So again, the total circulation through the site, if everything happens the way we envision it, we would have an entrance and an exit on Easton Avenue,
Correct.
and then an exit only on Easton Avenue, correct? There's one entrance coming off the 287 ramp, and there's also an exit on Easton Avenue.
At that same location.
Right.
Yeah,
And then a full entrance and exit on World's Fair Drive.
that's correct.
Okay. When we received the approval for the hotel, there were numerous variances that were granted.
That's correct.
Okay, and as a result of this application, each and every one of the variances that were granted are in fact going to be diminished as far as the hotel is concerned.
As far as the hotel, let me get to the exacts. The only one that'll change will be coverage, but we can probably jump. Mr. Healy has them, or the staff has them outlined on page 2 of their report.
Yeah, and just so the board is aware, you do have a packet of staff reports. The only report that pertains to the subdivision, there's a separate report from the Technical Review Committee, March 12th, 2019. The rest relate to the use variance and site plan applications. So we should refer to that March 12th report.
Correct. Thank you. So that was the one I was pointing to on page 2. The variances are outlined. So if you see halfway down the page, lot 26.04. So for the lot area, it's a 5-acre minimum. We were approved before at 2.187 acres. As I said, we're bringing in more land, so we'll be above 2.6, hence making the lot more conforming. Lot frontage, as we said, there was no frontage before. So basically, with this drive coming out, gives 50 feet of frontage. So that, again, makes the lot more conforming. The only one that changes the other way, it was 66% impervious approved before, will be at 79%. That's basically because that slot of land will be largely driveway, so paved, so that'll up the ratio on that area. Floor area ratio also was approved at 0.81, and that'll drop to 0.67. So all good to the plus. So as far as this application, even though we will need the variance for the increased impervious, we do make better 3 other pre-existing or previously approved variances.
Okay. And with respect to the lot from which we are acquiring that strip of land, that lot will also require a variance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is that variance for the record?
That's lot 4.02. It's a 2-acre minimum, so that'll be reduced to 1.853 acres. And as you know, as we've said, it's the detention basin lot. It's not a development lot, if you will. So although the zoning technically applies, there are no buildings, parking lots, etc. That 2 acres would be critical to apply to.
Now, there are certain review comments from the TRC. There are 10 of them. Do you have any problem with complying with all of those review comments?
No, they're all technical in nature, lot numbers, etc. And so we'll address each of those.
Okay. And then can you very briefly give an opinion as to the justification for the grant of these variances?
Certainly for the variances, there'll be C2 variances, basically the positive and negative criteria. As I described, as far as the positive criteria goes, we feel that this circulation by bringing the driveway out in this location will be a big benefit to the neighbor specifically. The traffic will not go through their parking lot where it presently goes. As you're well aware, the traffic at this location on World's Fair, if people are trying to make a left out of there, that's tight. It's going to bring traffic out of that location, so that's a benefit. As far as any negatives, again, I really don't see any. We're reducing 3 of the variances that were previously approved. The technical one for the detention basin, again, there's no building or development, so I don't see any negatives from that. And as far as the coverage, we are handling that extra pavement or with stormwater management, so that would be the only possible effect. So since we're handling that, once again, I don't see any negative. So with that balance, I think that the positives outweigh the negative criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Ardman. I have no further questions.
Go ahead.
Dangerous intersection. Nursing home, that may exit on the avenue, but now you have a high volume gas station. Quick check. there's going to be volume in and out. In is not that bad, but out concerns me onto East Navy. That's a disaster intersection over there.
Mr. Reese, that's really part of the quick check application, and we will have a traffic consultant who will
Sure you will.
present testimony at that time.
So you will, and I'll repeat it.
I'm sure this has been done, I'd just like to ensure where the new driveway is coming out, that I'm going to assume, all right, hadn't heard anything about it, that has no negative impact on the parking lot driveways for the medical building. There's no conflicts in turning.
That's a good point, though, because I would say that could relate to this application. So no, the driveways, you can see the edge of the parking lot shown here, so those driveways are much closer to Easton Avenue. There are no direct driveways abutting that location.
I think it's a tremendous benefit to not have cars coming out of the present easement from the medical building, because you're right on the turn when people are coming off Easton Avenue. Not even a matter of making a left turn, but being able to get out. Any other questions?
Just, would it be possible to have another driveway at the back? If you're going to close that one off at the front, yeah, somewhere back in there, coming out to, also coming out to,
The land behind us is privately owned. There are two lots behind us that go out to Atrium Drive. We have no direct access to Atrium Drive. So the only thing we're really doing, Mr. McCracken, is really replacing that access easement with a full regular driveway, which is an improvement. And again, Easton Avenue is going to remain hopefully as is. That's our proposal.
Yeah. Straight to the back this way, it's actually in one of the other reports you have an aerial map, but I'll just put on the record, is for First Industrial, they have their industrial buildings and their loading docks facing towards our property. So conceptually, it would be a good idea, but we can't mix the traffic in with their loading docks.
okay.
Any others?
I have a question. Is this a technical subdivision?
It's a technical major. It is a subdivision. Normally, if you create two lots, it's a minor subdivision. But since we created a minor subdivision when this thing was done a couple of years ago, you cannot do two minors within 10 years. So this subdivision is a technical major subdivision. In reality, it's a two-lot minor subdivision, but technically it's called a major.
All right, because we don't have a subdivision drawing.
Yes, you do. You should have. We prepared a preliminary and final subdivision plat, which was part of our application, and Mr. Ardman can sort of review that again with you.
Right, so I flipped those so you could see the land development, so it makes sense. But this, as Peter said, this F1 plan and the plat plan were submitted, could be somewhere in those packets, but that's what this represents. And I believe that this is what the staff's report was on.
So we have this plan somewhere.
Yes, and that is, as Mr. Ardman said, there's a preliminary plat and a final plat, and that's what staff reviewed.
We have P1?
You have to speak on the microphone, on the record.
Any other questions? Any other testimony?
Actually, what I want to suggest is when you come in for the quick check thing, give us a nice looking diagram of your driveways, something like this.
No, that's definitely the plan. We'll have much more
So we
maps
can
and
see
maps and
how it
figures
comes
when
out
we
on
come
Easton
in.
Avenue and those
Definitely.
Good.
That's all of my testimony.
Open to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to make a comment?
Jonathan Gottlieb, an attorney associated with University Orthopedic Associates at 2 World's Fair Drive. Probably going to tell me we deal with this, the quick check, but the driveway into the quick check, is that going to be linked to the workaround driveway?
Yes, it will. There'll be a continuous flow through the site.
So customers from the quick check will have access to the road that is being proposed for tonight.
Yes, and that's the intent of it. That's why we went through all the effort. We proved that the site, without the quick check, didn't need it when we were approved for the hotel in the Bristol. But we recognized with staff that this driveway would be needed for the quick check. So yes, it is linked.
Why would, just for the quick check, why wouldn't people buying gas be directed back to the street and not around the property?
It's going to, and you'll hear from the traffic engineer, but they'll have both options. So they don't have to go out what we'll call the back entrance. There is an access still to make the right onto Easton Avenue, but this should split the traffic up. But again, you'll hear from the traffic engineer on that application of how much he thinks will go either way.
Because as the member said, it's a very difficult. Also, with respect to the gate, my understanding that it's going to be locked except for.
Yes. So, and I think not a full gate, but a chain across the driveway so that fire and police could have access, and they'll have either Knox box key or whatever they request to get through there.
Dr. Jeffrey Beckler, managing partner.
My name's Jeff Beckler. I'm an orthopedic surgeon with University Orthopedics.
Doctor, I need to swear you in. Could you raise your right hand?
Sure.
You swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think, we're the tenant and the owner of 2 World's Fair Drive, which is the property right next door. And we're basically, I don't know if you know about us, but we're an orthopedic practice. We have a surgery center in there. We have physical therapy. We have MRI scan, and we have a pediatric office also in the medical building. The high volume, a lot of patients, people going in per day. Today, for example, there's probably between 250 and 300 patients that went to the facility for the day, including the pediatric group, which also has Saturday office hours. So the building's open 6 days a week. It opens at 5:30 in the morning, goes until late into the evening. So there's a lot of traffic, a lot of people. So our concern is that the new people that are next door with the hotel and the other stuff, that it's safe for our patients, because we have people on crutches, we have people on wheelchairs, and we have young mothers with strollers walking across the street and in the parking lots all the time, and we want to make sure that the traffic is routed away from our building. And that's our major concern. And so I think we definitely have to have that easement road blocked off. I mean, and it can't just be a chain. I mean, it's got to be blocked. We can't have people, right now we have people cutting through our lot. We have police cars chasing them through our lot as they come off 287. People are coming through our lot because they want to avoid the traffic back up on Easton Avenue. Because as you know, you come off 287, there's all that traffic on Easton Avenue, and cars are bumper to bumper, and so they cut through our lot.
You're talking about through the easement.
Right, and onto World's Fair Drive so they can get out. So they're going to do the same thing when they come out and they see the quick check. They're going to cut through, go right around in that new road you're making and get on World's Fair Drive and take a right up on World's Fair Drive.
Okay, the new driveway that's proposed is bordering your parking lot, right?
Goes around, like probably half of our parking lot, around it.
Is there something that you might like along that driveway that might show more physical separation? Because wouldn't you, offhand, all things considered, rather have this traffic on the new driveway and off of the easement, period?
Absolutely, it's got to be off the easement.
Well, that'll be eliminated.
Right, but I mean, if you're going to put in a high volume place like a quick check, down there where cars are coming in and out all the time. I mean, they should have to come in and go right back out on East End Avenue. They shouldn't have an option to wind through and come on World's Fair Drive, because I guarantee you, with all the traffic, they're going to be cutting through.
Well, again, what things would you consider could be done that might, in your mind, make this driveway less impactful on your, keeping in mind that none of the people coming from the medical building should have to be, there shouldn't be any pedestrians from there ordinarily crossing on foot, crossing this driveway.
Yeah.
They'll be going to the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay, so what things might you suggest as like a fence along the parking lot?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
You know, or maybe some landscaping,
Separate the
something
street.
along that order. I can't think that the traffic would have any more, I would think it'd have less of an impact on the activity within your building than the traffic on the easement has now. So I don't think we have that as an issue, but I can
so what would
understand
you-
if you would like some separation.
Yeah, right now it's blocked because of construction. But like, what kind of a fence would they put on the easement?
We can't, Doctor, and this was actually already approved as part of the original application. We can't put a fence along at that easement line, at the property line, because the police want to get police cars or a fire engine through there in case they need to access the facility. But what they,
Which facility?
either your facility or our facility, depending on the emergency, they want another access through that.
No, we're talking about the new driveway.
Yeah, we're talking about the new driveway.
Well, the new driveway is just a regular open driveway to our site, and it has no direct access to your site.
Is there any room for a
The
fence?
new driveway has access to your site.
The new
Why
dri-
do they need it through the easement is my point.
The only thing that is going through the easement is what was requested by the fire and police department for emergency access. Your easement, if you look at the map, the easement is right here in the front of your building.
Right.
They have requested that we put a chain across there with a lock. So therefore, you have no vehicular traffic that will be able to get onto that easement to come through your property to get out to World's Fair Drive.
So it's just a chain.
It's a chain. Yeah, but a car can't get through it. Yeah.
But do we have the ability and the space along the new driveway to put a fence up or landscaping or trees or something of that sort that would establish a visible separation between the parking lot of the medical building and the new driveway?
So we understand your concerns. Some places it's pinched a little more, but other places there's definitely room. So between here and that next application, we'll take a better look at that and be prepared to show what we can come up with.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is an application for the subdivision, and we're getting into use variance and site plan. I mean, and I'm really not meaning to cut you off, but when there's the application for the site plan, they're gonna have Mr. Ardman here, they're gonna have their traffic expert. We're gonna get into the very, nitty-gritty of the site plan, of the traffic study, and everything. All this is really doing is, in a way, Mr. Lanford showed the quick check, so, it's not in a complete vacuum, but in a way, I think you have to put the quick check out of your mind. This is just a subdivision, and all this is doing is allowing the opportunity for another access to that site from World's Fair, other than going through the orthopedic place.
I
So
understand that.
in that
We
big
aren't going to
picture
get
view,
into
if I-
limiting traffic to and from Quick Check tonight. That's not part of it. But I do think establishing the possible need for some sort of a separation on the new driveway, I think that is germane to what we're talking about tonight. Because that has nothing to do with Quick Check right now.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
just-
there is no connection between, they're two totally separate lots.
Yeah, and-
but,
But
New access road that's being discussed.
yeah, Just for the record, and again, I don't think it is germane to tonight's application, but other than the access drive, which is being blocked off, there is a detention basin between the interior road and the medical office. Our new access drive that we have coming in off of World's Fair Drive, if you look at the plan closely, trees that are actually on your property that segregate and separate the access drive from the medical office parking lot. So those two things are segregated and separated. But again, we can look at putting some additional landscaping in, and we can do that at the time we come back with the quick check application. But there is no.
Let me ask, how come the quick check isn't on tonight? I mean, we got this.
The reason is that we were at the Historic Commission last week. They had some questions concerning signage, some questions concerning the canopy, so they did not give an approval last week. We have to go back to them next month. We also have to go back to DRCC since this property fronts on the canal. And if there were any requested changes by those agencies, we wanted you to see the final plan rather than show you a plan and then have to go to DRCC or Historic and then have to change it again. So that's why we're not proceeding tonight, because we're still trying to work through some other agencies.
Okay, we'll move past that.
Got that?
We're still open to the public. But
Mr. Lanford, if this quick check was part of the previous hearing with the hotels and the nursing home, I would think it might have been a tougher approval at that point if we knew about this high-volume gas station, because you had an empty piece of land, news to come. Well, the news came, and I have concerns about it. But
and you will hear the application. The mere fact, quite frankly, that we are proposing a quick check, we have to establish the proofs that this is a particularly suited site for the quick check. You will hear that testimony, and then you will vote up and down on that issue in June. Again, we weren't holding anything back on you at that time. The reason was when we met with staff, they said to us that they would not even consider supporting a quick check unless we were able to get this access, and it took us about a year to deal with First Industrial to get this access. So we've been working at this for over a year and a half. But again, you'll hear a full application on the quick check, and either we meet our burdens of proof or we don't, but that'll be next month.
actually, what was approved was basically a retail pad, which obviously would have had multiple users and other issues associated with it. I don't want to get involved with quick check tonight. It's just the subdivision and the access, but I just wanted to be sure that there might be the potential to separate the access from the medical building parking lot. I think that's been handled. I think that might, be able to happen. Anything else we can deal with later. We get into a lot of problems sometimes in the past, though, trying to limit, and when you have an access to this property and the facilities there, and you have three separate uses, you have a lot of trouble trying to regulate who's going in the driveway for what. So we'll let that site plan, if that's even desirable, let that happen at the next site plan hearing. In the meantime, we're still open to the public, so if there's anyone else who'd like to speak, please come forward. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more takers, so we'll close to the public. Anything you want to?
Just very briefly, as Mr. Ortman indicated, there were previous variances granted for the hotel by us acquiring this land, and it was a chore to acquire it, and it was through great expense that we were able to acquire this land to accomplish this other method of ingress and egress. We are able to reduce the variances that were previously granted. We were able to now eliminate any vehicular traffic through the medical office, which we would have a right under the easement to do, no matter what the user was. I'm sure a quick check would not have been approved with that access, but there is a vehicular access through the medical office, which is now being eliminated except for emergency vehicles. So that what we have done is basically what the staff recommended. The subdivision, the only variance that is really being created by this is some slight additional impervious coverage because of the driveway and a slight reduction of the size of the lot where the detention basin remains, and that lot will never be used for anything other than a detention basin. So there are, as Mr. Hartman says, many positives to the grant of this subdivision and no negatives, and I would respectfully request that the board grant the subdivision approval with the variances.
All right, any board comments, questions, discussion, or motion?
I'm concerned about the access onto Eastern Avenue with.
That's not part of this, Mr.
I understand, yeah. But what I'm concerned about is that you're taking a very large subdivision and breaking it up into pieces. And I don't see that it's connected to, I mean, we've got a whole bunch of stuff over there with the, what is it, DoubleTree and all that.
That has nothing to do with this site.
I understand it has nothing to do with it. Why?
We don't have any connection to DoubleTree. We have no access to DoubleTree. This site only has access, always only had access to Easton Avenue when it was a hotel. The only access it ever had was to Easton Avenue, and then it had an access through an easement through the medical building. Those were the only access points.
I was out there today, and I talked to somebody, and they said they were going to lower the quick check at least 6-8 feet.
I don't think.
All that land.
I want to caution the board. We're only here, we're not here for this quick
yeah,
check tonight. We're only here for a subdivision to create a driveway. So I really think the board needs to stay away from the quick check aspects until June.
Because we don't really even have a plan.
Well, you do have a plan, but
Well, I got what you gave,
but
that doesn't.
Using your own words, you don't deem it complete because there's other reviews happening. We don't need to be discussing it. We have nothing officially in terms of this hearing to discuss.
And the access points on Easton Avenue, Mr. McCracken, that you're referencing are the access points that were there before. They were
going to change them?
They're not changed. They're not being changed at all. And they were approved by the board, and actually when we got the hotel approved and when we have the assisted living facility approved, those access points were on the plan and were approved. So this board reviewed that and approved it 2 years ago, and they haven't changed.
I think the way to think about it is, since this is a subdivision, whatever is going to be built on that pad, whether you approve a quick check or it's something else, this subdivision creates much better and much safer access to that lot. It takes the access away from going through the orthopedic place and puts it on a driveway much further away from the intersection. Whatever is built on that lot, this subdivision is going to create much better access. In my opinion, that's really the sum of this application. And then the quick check, you'll review that on its own merits.
You know what else it's doing that hasn't been mentioned? Everybody seems to assume that the only access and egress that's valuable here is on Easton Avenue. This driveway opens up this property to a heck of a lot of other people coming from a lot of different directions, many of whom in the past would have to go on Easton Avenue, go through a U-turn at the Easton Avenue interchange and come back on Easton Avenue to get into this site. That doesn't have to happen with this access. And when you have patients in a medical facility and a hotel, they have indirect access now out this driveway to go to 287. It may not be as handy as the ramp right on Easton Avenue, if you have to go World's Fair Drive, Pierce Street, Davidson. But one of the big disadvantages of the last use in this property was the lack of access from any other direction other than travelers coming off 287 for the most part. This changes that. And I want to see this applicant make it work, because I think it's very important to be able to get into this property without even going on Easton Avenue. You have a whole list of tenants on World's Fair Drive in different areas that can come back and can use facilities there. And even if it is just to get gas, if that's what it ends up being, you don't have to fight Easton Avenue and making U-turns to get there. Any other comments? Any motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
A second.
Bruce McCracken,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Joel Reese, Cheryl Berthia,
Yes.
Cheryl Bugallo,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes, now go out and make this work, and make it work for the medical building too.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just for the record, can you announce on the record that the site plan application and use variance for the quick check is carried to June 20th without further notice?
The next hearing on the next phase of this application is going to be June
20th?
20th.
20th?
20th.
June 20th, no further notification. Okay, final hearing, Matson Construction, ZBA 18-00019, applicant requests to construct a single-family dwelling at 235 Jerome Avenue, Somerset, block 564, lots 23 to 25 in the R10 zone.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. This is an application to construct a single-family residential dwelling on a vacant lot located at 235 Jerome Avenue. Matson Construction is going to be represented this evening by Maureen Matson, who will present testimony concerning the house that she intends to construct. And also I have with me this evening Mr. Fisk, who is also the surveyor who prepared the subdivision plan and a licensed planner. The report that was generated in conjunction with this application was a report from the Technical Review Committee dated May 7th, 2019. We will go over that report a little bit later this evening. My first witness is Maureen Matson.
Could you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
Maureen Matson, 4 Nevins Court, Hillsborough, New Jersey, 08844.
Thank you.
Ms. Matson, are you a principal in Matson Construction?
I am.
And what does Matson Construction do?
Builds homes.
Okay, and how many homes have you built in Franklin Township approximately?
About 20.
Okay, and the property at 235 Jerome Avenue?
Yes.
You are a contract purchaser of that property, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that property fronts on Jerome. Is Jerome an improved street at that point in time in front of that property?
Yes, it has pavement. Yes.
Okay, and we will have to extend some of that pavement in order to
Yes.
build a single-family house.
Yes.
Now, the lot in question is 7,500 square feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the zone requirements, if there are no water and sewer, are 20,000 square feet, is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you proposing to service this house by public water or public sewer?
Public sewer and a well.
Okay, and how do you intend to get public sewer to the property?
Through an easement of the adjacent property behind Howard Ave, 229 Howard Ave.
Okay, you have negotiated sanitary sewer easement, and that would be lot 28.01, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then you'll run a sanitary sewer line through that property, and where does it hook into?
It hooks into the sewer system in Howard Avenue.
Okay, and where does that sewer ultimately go to?
It goes to Southbound Brook.
Okay, and have you been in touch with Southbound Brook about getting sewer service for that lot?
I have.
Okay, and have you reached a final agreement with Southbound Brook?
Yes, they're telling me I can connect, but they're trying to finalize the agreement. The agreement expired with Franklin Township, so they're redoing the agreement.
Okay, and you have no problem with the condition of approval that we have to satisfy the township that there is sewer availability in Southbound Brook as part of this approval?
Yes, that is fine.
Okay, and can you indicate to the board what type of house do you intend to construct on the property?
A 4-bedroom colonial, 2-car garage, full basement.
Okay, and you submitted a set of plans prepared by Mr. Druga, which shows the house that you intend to build?
I did.
Okay, and the house has vinyl siding?
It does.
And it has some brick trim, and it has a 2-car garage, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, since this lot is an undersized lot, law requires you to try to make the lot conforming by either acquiring adjacent property or by selling this lot to the adjoining property owners. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You're aware of that because you've been through this before?
Yes.
Okay. The lots on either side of you, who are they owned by?
Franklin Township.
Okay. And did you send a letter to Franklin Township to see if they have any interest in either A, selling you any additional land or purchasing the property?
I did.
And did you do that on March 8th, 2018?
Yes.
Okay, and did you get a response from Franklin Township?
I did.
And what was that response?
They were not interested.
Okay. Let me find.
That's the one.
I have for the record the letter that we sent to Franklin Township and a signed response indicating that they were not interested. I would like to have that marked as A1. Did you, and I indicated that that letter was sent in 2018. Did you resend the letter to Franklin Township since now we're in 2019?
I did.
Okay, and you sent it to Franklin Township certified mail on April 28th, 2019. Did you not?
I did.
And this is a copy of that letter?
It is.
Okay, and did Franklin Township respond to that letter?
No, they didn't.
A2, please.
That was sent April 28th?
April 28th. I have no further questions of Ms. Mattson.
Any board questions? Could you, Mark, would you happen to have any insight in why the town would not show any kind of interest in purchasing this property if the town owns the bordering properties on either side? I would think that if this house is approved and built, and the average household has 2 children, and they go through the schools in Franklin Township for 12 years, that possibly purchasing the lot would be a town savings. Since I wouldn't suggest this if it were in isolation someplace necessarily, but since it's bordering.
Yeah. Well, I feel a little funny speaking for the township, but generally I can say that the township is hesitant to acquire land that they don't have, specific purpose for. We're going to, generally if the township's going to acquire land, it is going to be, okay, we are going to use that for a park. We're going to use it for something related to DPW. Just acquiring land for, not for the sake of having land, but for acquiring land without a designated purpose, I know that the township leadership is hesitant to do that. And as far as selling land, I think, well, I think the township has to go through the whole bidding process to just sell land. I don't think we can just sell land to somebody who asks for it. The legal process involved in that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
But just on the road, you said that I think I was out there, I'm not sure if I'm in the right exact place. You said you had to extend the road?
We have to widen the road and extend it so we can get a driveway to the
How
property.
many
Mr.
feet?
Fisk will deal with that.
How many feet? Yeah. Well, he's going to deal with it. Okay, because when I was out there, it looked like there was a lot of wetlands. At the end of the road, it was,
Yes, we're not extending it that way. We're just widening, we're in the front, closer to the Samuel. So we're just widening our section to Samuel.
the road doesn't go through, right?
No, it doesn't go through.
But you can drive around and it's a dead end on the other side?
Yes, yes.
And that's wetlands in there between the two?
We don't know what's between the two. All we are required to do, and you'll hear from Mr. Fisk, is widen the road and extend it so we can get a driveway into that property. We're not extending it any further than that.
Is it on wetlands?
Excuse me?
Is the property on wetlands?
Our property? No.
No.
Other questions? We'll save opening to the public for when you conclude.
Was there a wetlands delineation?
No, there wasn't a wetlands delineation for this, but they didn't say there was wetlands there.
We submitted a letter to the DRCC concerning this project, and they had no objection to it. If they had an inkling that there were issues of wetlands, they would have asked us for a delineation.
Are you going to fill in? They look like a dump truck full of stuff that was going to get pushed. Who's doing the construction?
But there's nothing on the property now.
There's nothing on the property.
On the roadway?
No?
Where was I in the wrong place? I'll have to go check again.
Any others?
Okay.
Could you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please?
Stephen with a PH, M. Fisk, F-I-S-K, 631 Union Avenue, Middlesex, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisk, you are both a licensed professional land surveyor and also a professional planner in the state of New Jersey?
Correct.
This is fine. Mr. Fisk has been here before.
Okay. Mr. Fisk, can you describe the subject property, please?
Subject property is on Jerome Avenue off of Samuel Place. Has an area of 7,500 square feet. As stated previously, we are required to have an area of 20,000 square feet because we don't have public sewer and public water. We will have public sewer, so it's just a matter of putting a well on the property, which causes us to have the requirement of 20,000 square feet rather than 10,000.
And how far is this property approximately from the intersection of Samuel?
It's about 48 feet from Samuel Place. The township lot is in between this property and Samuel Place.
Okay, and the township lot is on that corner, is that correct?
Right, and there's other township property to the north of this property along the west side of Jerome Avenue. And that was what was referred to in the letters to the township. The only other property bordering this property is Lot 28.01, which fronts on Howard Avenue, through which the applicant has obtained a sanitary sewer easement in order to construct a lateral for sewer to serve this property. As far as the wetlands issue, the property was examined visually, and also we checked the DEP mapping to ascertain that there were no wetlands on this property. There could be wetlands further to the north. We did not examine off-site in the area between the dead ends on Jerome Avenue on either side. As far as what we propose to do, I spoke with Scott Thomas in the engineering department today to clarify what was required for bringing the roadway up to standard, and it has been determined that we will propose a 28-foot wide paved road from Samuel Place to the end of our lot. This will accommodate our driveway, which as of now will be the only driveway on this road, and it'll allow for two-way traffic and actually parking if necessary with a 28-foot width. Right now, the roadway that is there varies between about 14 to 16 feet wide. So there will be a great improvement to the area and the building of a township road.
Okay, now, the proposed plan that we have before the board is to construct a single-family dwelling, is that correct?
Yes.
And related site improvements such as driveways and walkways, correct?
Yes.
And the dwelling itself meets the zone requirements for the zone as far as percentage of coverage, does it not?
Yes, the only variances involved will be the lot area that I mentioned and the lot width of 75 feet versus 100 feet required. All of the yard requirements and all of the coverage requirements will be met in spite of the reduced size of the lot.
Okay. And can you indicate to the board if there are any, what are the surrounding land uses around the subject property, if you know?
The area is a residential area. All the uses are residential. There are houses along Howard Avenue. And I will mention that there is curb and sidewalk on Howard Avenue. However, the entire rest of the neighborhood is without curb and without sidewalk and very narrow roadways, about 16 feet wide. That should be a justification for our request of a waiver for curb and sidewalk along this property. The residences along Howard Avenue were built in the 1980s. They're basically almost the same size as what we were proposing on this lot. Most of the lots on Howard Avenue are 100 feet wide. However, there are two with approximately the same size house on 75-foot lots on Howard Avenue also. The houses on Howard Avenue only have a one-car garage, whereas this property is proposing a two-car, which makes the house slightly larger footprint. As you move down Samuel Place towards Lewis Avenue and further down towards the equator, it's still a residential use. Some of the houses there are approximately the same size as what we're proposing on this property.
Mr. Fisk, in addition to constructing a house, obviously when you construct a house and a driveway, you're creating some impervious coverage. How do we handle the water that now would currently sit on the site that's not going to sit on the site because of a house? Are there any township requirements for us to deal with that issue?
Yes, the township does require that we do a soil test on every lot that a house is proposed to be built, and that was done successfully. A dry well was designed and is shown to be constructed to mitigate the runoff for the impervious that is being constructed.
And in conjunction with this application, you did in fact submit a dry well report dated October 15th, 2018, signed by Mr. Gazali from your office. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and that has, I assume, been reviewed by either Mr. Thomas or someone else in the municipality?
The TRC report states that they will review the design at the time of a building permit. It has been submitted to them, but they apparently have not reviewed it yet. I believe it'll be in conformance with the township requirements.
Okay. And again, for the record, this property will be served by a well and by public sewer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, we are asking for the two variances. In your capacity as a planner, can you give the board a justification for the grant of those two variances?
I believe the variances can be approved based on hardship, the fact that we cannot acquire additional property to meet the area requirement or the width requirement. In addition to that, I believe there is no detriment to this application to the public, and I believe there are certain benefits in the advancement of the municipal land use law, and also we will be constructing a roadway which meets township standards for approximately 130 or 40 feet.
And do you see any negative impacts by granting this variance?
I see none.
Okay. And have you had an opportunity to review the TRC report that I referenced earlier, dated May 7th, 2019?
I have.
And there were some plan comments, items number 5. We are seeking a waiver of the sidewalk and curbing for this 140 feet of road that we're building. Is that correct?
We are.
Okay. And all of the other comments, B through F, we can comply with?
Correct.
And they don't have any detrimental or different effect on the plan that is being reviewed by the board this evening. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I have no further questions of Mr. Fisk.
Board questions.
Just, I just heard you say you're going to extend the roadway 140 feet.
We are going to construct a roadway which meets township requirements of 28 feet wide from Samuel Place, approximately 140 feet to the end of our property, the north end of our property.
So let me refer you to the plan, okay? And the plan shows the edge of asphalt roadway in Jerome. And it shows that it extends in front of the subject property. Is that correct? So, Mr. Fisk, that's correct? It extends in front of the
Yes,
subject
it
property?
actually goes a little bit beyond our property
Okay,
right now.
but it's very narrow.
Yes, 14 to 16
So
feet
staff is
wide.
making, since you're proposing a building lot, you have to have a road that's township standard, so you'll have to widen what is very narrow road to a 28-foot wide road, but it's not extending further beyond your lot down the paper street.
Correct.
So basically, right here, this is the lot.
Okay, this is a two-story house?
Yes, sir.
Is that the general architecture in the neighborhood?
Yes. Almost all of the houses are 2 stories.
In terms of square footage? What?
In terms of FAR square footage?
How many
coverage?
square feet is this house?
This house covers 1,474 square feet of footprint and is approximately 2,350 square feet.
And that compares favorably with the,
It's similar to a lot of the houses. Most of them are a little bit smaller. Most of them, especially on Howard, only have 1-car garage, which reduces the size of the house.
now, where does this site plan, how's this stand in relation to the footprint of the house and the setbacks? Does the footprint of the house go to all the setbacks?
No. We're setting the house back 26 feet, whereas 25 is required. There's a 40-foot rear yard. We have an overhang that's 42.5 feet from the rear yard. We comply. The side yard requirement is 8 feet and 20 foot total. Our minimum is 13 feet, and we have 26.6 foot total.
Mr. Chairman, I think your question is if it's speaking to the coverage, they're allowed to have 20% building coverage. They have 19.65. And impervious coverage, they're allowed to have 30, and they're at 29.35.
Okay, so is there going to be a memorandum with the person who buys this house to the effect that if they want a patio or a storage shed or any other structure that they need to get a variance for?
We can
Yes.
put that in any contract or memorandum if that's a condition that the board wants us to do.
What if the house were just one garage instead of two? What would that effect be on impervious coverage and a setback? And
Mr. Thomas,
The house by 10 feet would actually make the house smaller because only part of it's the garage. So it would have to be a redesign. It doesn't automatically change the numbers that you're looking at.
All right.
I think that the question here is you're asking for a variance for a lot that's smaller than required, and you've proposed a house that absolutely maxes out the building coverage and impervious coverage, meaning that any future homeowner, no matter what they do, smallest storage shed, a little patio out the back, anything is going to require more variances.
Well, we've had a number of other applications, and before this board, most of them, where we've had small lots, and even smaller lots than this one, if you recall, in the last couple of years, where we had to even ask for a variance on coverage because the lot was 50 feet wide. And naturally, anything that was built on that lot, or any similar type lot, would have had the same situation as this lot.
I think there were a couple applications, if memories also affected a little reduction in the size of the houses.
Well,
And you also have
we
the
had to under
opportunity
50.
to avoid that in this situation.
but-
On a 50-foot wide lot, you can't really avoid a building coverage or impervious. Here, you could make the house smaller.
But we meet the coverage requirements of the zone. We're not asking for a variance for the.
You're asking for a lot area variance,
Uh,
or significant lot area variance.
Because the municipality won't acquire the lot or sell us the lot, so we're entitled to it. That has nothing to do with the issue of coverage. We do meet the coverage requirements. Quite frankly, Mr. Thomas, if you take a two-car garage and turn it into a one-car garage, and then put a storage shed or other things, I mean, that could be done, but the reality is, what do people do today if they have a two-car garage and a driveway? One of the parts of the interior of the garage is going to be used for storage, and I think it's probably nicer looking to have storage inside your garage than have a shed outside. So the fact that there is a two-car garage gives a property owner the opportunity to have storage on that site.
Well, whether it's nicer than a storage shed that someone chooses to build.
Right.
Sort of a stretch, because that's a broad value judgment, depending. But isn't this a little bit at the heart of the variance? Because if it met the lot size requirements, you could do some of these things. There'll be some property left over. Part of the reason it's cramped like this is the property's even smaller, you know, 20,000 square feet if there's no sewer or water, but it's normally 10,000 square feet, right? It's even smaller than that.
Correct. But it meets all of the bulk requirements. We meet the side yard, front yard, rear yard, and coverage requirements of the zone. If the lot was bigger, if it was 10,000 square feet, we could build a bigger house. If the lot was 20,000 square feet, we could build an even bigger house. What we are building is a house that meets all of the coverage requirements of the zone. That has nothing to do with the variance. The variance has to do with frontage and lot area, and the proofs regarding the frontage and lot area are that we are unable to acquire any additional land, nor is the township willing to buy this lot. That's the variance that we're seeking.
Mr. Chairman?
How do you know that you're not, you're unable? You gave us the letter, right?
The letter says they don't want to buy the lot, nor do they want to sell us land.
The point, here's the point. That lot at the end is just the township, and it's just going to sit there. And I think that the chairman's suggestion that the township actually look and see whether they want them, they could give it to them for nothing, if you know what I mean.
Mr. McCracken, we are required under the law to send a letter to the adjoining property owners.
I know what I'm talking about outside of that.
Well, we did what we are required to do, and the township actually signed a letter saying they're not interested in selling us anything, and they're not interested in buying the lot. And we actually sent them a second letter, which they haven't responded to. But again, I think the case law is very clear as to what we're required to do, and we did it. If the township had said, well, we don't need that corner lot, and we're going to put it up for bid, and, you know, when you can buy it, you know, we would have to do that. But
Habitat for Humanity might want it. Who knows?
But that's up to the township. I think what we've done is what we are required to do under the case law. And like I said, the issue of the coverages is really a non-issue regarding the variances, because the coverages are not variances. We meet all of the coverage requirements and all of the setback requirements.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I could probably guarantee us that once they sell this house and there's no room to move, to build anything else, a storage shed or an extra patio on this property, this is going to be back here as a hardship case. And I think when you meet all the requirements just about, okay, it's shoehorned into this property with no excess for expansion. I think it's a problem approval here.
The other question too with buy and sell are the township lots conforming so that if they sold portions of it, they would become non-conforming lots?
The township lot to the left of us is a small sliver that is non-conforming. The lot to the right of us is a rather large lot that I believe is conforming.
And they wouldn't sell the sliver either, lot 22?
Well, their response was they signed a letter saying they're not interested.
Well, yeah, but did you actively talk to the town to try and buy it, or just sent a letter and whatever the letter says?
We did what we were required to do.
I know you did what you were required.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if Mr. Vornlocker or the Land Development Committee of this township was interested, they would have reached out to us. And I don't know whether it was discussed at the Land Development Committee or not, but again, the response was they were not interested. So it's not that they didn't look at it or ignored us, that they didn't respond. There was a written response saying they are not interested.
And I would just say, as far as, Joel, I would just recommend you caution any decision upon whether you feel they've gone above and beyond. They did do what's legally required.
No,
I would just, as far as that is concerned.
No, Mark, my concern is that once they sell this house, I guarantee you we're going to have a hardship case back at this board.
I don't disagree with you. I made the same point earlier. My only point is, certainly don't make any vote you would have based on you didn't feel they did enough to try to buy or sell, because that can't be the basis of a vote.
My concern is they may need a smaller footprint on this property, not this larger footprint that just about makes it, and there's no room for any other movement on it. That's my concern.
One of the things that I suggest in the future, and I don't know how it can be made to happen, but when it involves township property like this, township, the person who's making that decision and sending the letter should actually send us a report from their point of view why they're not interested in it or why they are interested in it. I would think that would just be something that would complete the package, because when we get here and we discuss these things, we don't know if anyone from the township even went out and looked at this or even picked up a map and looked at it. You know, when you get here and you find out that it's bordered by two properties, offhand it might make sense to have it. And again, the idea that you're granting a variance for a house that involves school children, and the big thing in this town in the last 10 years is how do we reduce the school population? You know, 2 kids for 12 years at $10,000 a year, which is very cheap. It's a lot more in terms of what the cost per student is. It might be economically feasible that the town would buy this property. Point I'm making is, as a board, we have nothing to help us with our decision making, and everybody else gives us a report. The engineer, you do, police, fire, health department. We should get a report from whoever is responding to this.
We should get a wetlands delineation too.
As far as, I think we could certainly, in the staff report, we could try to make a note of finding out what the reasons were and maybe putting those in the report. A lot of times when we do our report from the TRC or if it's from the individual staff members, it's because we received an application and we're reviewing it at the time. Sometimes these buy-sell letters don't happen during that same process. And I guess I'd also say in some ways well, I won't make that point, but I think I don't remember the exact reasons for this situation, but I know that in similar situations in the past, the reasons I gave before are the reasons. Again, usually the township doesn't want to take on land that they don't have a designated purpose. There is no designated purpose. This isn't earmarked to be a park. It's not earmarked to be a DPW yard. It's just the township acquiring land. And we have an excess of land and we have an excess of buildings, frankly, that we're trying to figure out what to do with them. We have a number of historic buildings that we have to come up with a plan of how we can use them. And then again, I mentioned that the sell side, we can't just give or sell property to people.
Yeah, I understand that very clearly. I just think as a board, we would be entitled to some kind of feedback.
Well, I can certainly personally make a point of finding out. And I do sit with the land use committee. Commonly these things do go to land use. I don't remember this one. I think the first request was almost a year ago. So I don't remember. But in future cases, I'll try to make a point and put that in the report.
Hey, thanks.
I mean, when you look
Anything else?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, when you...
We're cracking at a question.
Just about the wetlands delineation. I mean, I think he said he was going to follow up with something, but I'd like to see that before we actually approve.
That would be a condition,
A
right?
condition, yeah.
There's no wetlands on any maps on that property.
Well, somebody should go out and look at it, because I did, and,
We can go out there and issue a report.
yeah.
I have a question about the size. The justification here is saying that the same size lot exists in the neighborhood, but for the same size lot, the size of the dwelling, how does that compare to what you're proposing?
There are two 75-foot lots on Howard Avenue. The footprint and FAR on those houses are almost as large, not quite as large as what we're proposing. They have one-car garages, and we have a two-car garage, which makes our house a little bit larger.
Well, this looks like a very large house with bedroom house for a very large family. So there's room, I think, to downsize this house to fit the property better, I think.
Any other questions? All right, well, you have no more witnesses, right?
I do not have any additional witnesses,
I
Mr.
will
Chairman.
open to the public, and anyone who wants to ask a question or make a comment. Well, you need to be sworn in, you need to speak directly into the mic.
Sir, could you raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
Jack King, 306 Samuel Place, Somerset, New Jersey.
Thank you.
I live right down the street. I've lived there for 30 years. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a professional planner. Our neighborhood has been devastated by flooding the last 30 years. Our basements have been flooded. Every time it rains, my house looks like there's a moat around it. By adding any impervious coverage to this neighborhood, it's just going to make conditions worse. So even though, I've been on this side of the table, and in this case, you need more property. That's what you need. Or you need a smaller house. There's actually two properties on Equator Avenue that meet the requirements that they're looking for sale. Why don't they build on those? They're 100 by, I think it's 100 by 400 feet long. It's up for sale, This lot is undersized, and they want to build an extra big house. The impervious is definitely going to be a problem. The township needs to look at the area at the end of Jerome. It's always been flooded. I think if the DEP looks at it, they're going to find that it is now wetlands. It's put that way for years. The problem is I've had Department of Public Works out there many times, and there's no slope, and water goes out and just big flood area. And it's on the border of Southbound Brook, and there's no agreement, I guess, with Southbound Brook to where this water can go. And so it's been a big problem. So I implore the chairman and the board have, Department of Public Works look at this, maybe even DEP or the property owner to look at building a much smaller house if they are stuck.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ma'am, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
My name is Luann New, N-E-W. I live at 521 Jerome Avenue, Somerset.
Thank you.
I have some comments and some questions. I don't know if I should ask all the questions at once or one at a time to get answered. I don't know if there's a time limit. I don't have that many, but I mean, which is better?
Start asking.
Okay. I understand that this is a non-conforming and isolated lot surrounded by township property, and that you did send the letter. But I do wonder if in that letter, we don't know what the letter said, and we don't know what the response said. You do, but we don't. Did you even try to have an appraisal done to substantiate the value you were willing to give the town for the property? Did you ask for a specific amount of money in order to sell the property back to the town? That would be one question I would have. In order to try and, I understand it's your duty to try and mitigate the hardship. The hardship is that it's an undersized lot.
The law requires us to see if there is an interest on the part of the town or the adjoining property owner. In this case, it's the town.
Sure.
If the town was interested in acquiring the property, the case law is clear that the valuation would be determined as the fair market value as an approved building lot. We would then get an appraisal. We would give the appraisal to the township, and that would be the number we would be negotiating with. But if there is no interest in the township acquiring the property, there's no reason for us to get an appraisal. So we did not get an appraisal because the township was not interested. Again, if the township was interested in selling the land, they would have to put it up for bid, and obviously they didn't do that.
Right, okay, thank you. The second concern I have is a health and safety concern. And I understand you need 20,000 square feet when you're not hooked up into public water and sewer. And that if you are, you need 10,000. And they're hoping to get this approval reapproved for the easement to hook up into the sewer. They're still undersized. They're still only 7,500, and you're supposed to have 10,000 for the sewer. so they're only have 75% of what they're supposed to have. I'm sure that there is a health and safety reason that the zoning is that way. Of even more concern to me, though, is the fact that they still will only have 7,500 square feet, and they have a well. You're supposed to have 20,000 square feet when you have when you don't have public water. They don't have public water. I wonder what that does to the potability of the water in the well, that they only have 37% of the lot size they're supposed to have in order to have well water. I worry about them. I worry about what it does to the rest of our wells. Regarding the street and where it's located, Howard, there's Jerome and then there's Howard, and this property backs up to the houses that are on Howard. Howard is hooked up into Southbound Brooks sewer system, and that's what they're looking for, an easement in order to do that. Howard's the only street in the neighborhood that's hooked up into public sewer. The rest of us all have septic. I don't know how this easement works. I don't know when you say the approval has expired and that the property you're going through, and I don't know whether it's pertinent, but the address you gave is for sale. With the people moving, on my way here, they were having a yard sale called a moving sale. I don't know how that affects the easement you have with the people at that property, but if that would also be a condition, and if they sell the property, if the new owner won't do the easement, does that just if that was a condition and they can't meet it, would the board know that so that the building cannot go forward?
Let me respond to that question. We have negotiated an easement. We have a signed easement that will be filed, so it will be binding on a future buyer. And as I indicated in my opening statement, that this board really does need to impose a condition because we can't put a septic on that lot because it's too small, that we have to tie into the sewer system in order to build a house, and that would be a condition of approval. If something happens where we can't, then we can't build a house.
Okay. Question also regarding water, but again, the standing water, as Jack discussed, and as you've seen for yourself, while I realize that's not the property, so it's not of your concern that it's not on the property there, the idea of covering over property, even though you are within the scope of the imperviousness coverage, that scope was based on properties of 10,000 and 20,000 square feet. Well, 30% covered, 70% uncovered at 7,500 square feet isn't nearly as much as 70% uncovered of 20,000 square feet. And the property at the end of the street that you were referring to, sir, where it dead ends, and there's always standing water there. We all have swales, other than the people on Howard, because they have sewer. We have septic. There are swales, and that gets the rainwater, etc., and all of it dumps into that property between the two dead ends of Jerome. There is always standing water there. The board has denied variances for people to build on that property in the past because of these issues. So any more coverage, it seems to me, would be detrimental to the neighborhood there. That is the issue with the water. I think you were in the right spot. It does dead end, and there's just swampy land there. I had another question regarding the blacktop, and you mentioned how you would have to widen the street because that street is very narrow, 14 feet. And I don't know this answer. One, who pays for it? And I assume that if you're spreading it from 14 feet to 28 feet, that's the township right of way. But would the applicant pay for the blacktop, or the town and my taxes are added to it, or the owner on the other side of Jerome, would they have to pay for their side?
The township is requiring that we meaning the applicant, build or widen the road at their expense, so it is being done by the applicant. Once it is done, it is also done to township standards. They would then accept the road at that point in time. The snow plowing is the township's responsibility, but the construction is ours.
Okay. And then my last point.
Let me ask a quick
My
question.
last point
Oh,
is
after
just
her.
regarding the zoning. yes, it does meet every technical aspect. You cover 29%, you're allowed to cover 30. Your setback is 42, you're allowed to have 40. Your other setback's 26, you're allowed 25. But another part of zoning law concerns the appearance of the house and the character of the neighborhood. Few houses are as large as this one in the neighborhood, and all of them that are larger are on significantly larger lots. Mr. Fisk mentioned that there are two houses on Howard that are only 7,500 square feet. They're also only 1,900 square foot houses. He referred to them as somewhat smaller. This house is almost 2,500 square feet. 1,900 to 2,500, that's 25% bigger on a lot, on the same size lot. Almost every other house on Howard, including all the ones that this backs up to, those two lots are on the far side of Howard and closer to southbound Brook. The houses that these would back up on and be the closest to are all on 10,000 square feet, and none of them are 2,000 square feet. Some of them are actually only 1,500 or 1,600 square feet. So this house is bigger. Although most of the houses in the neighborhood are two-story, on Howard, which is the closest street, and the houses that they look the most like, those are all bi-levels, the type where you walk in the front door and either you go up or down. So while they're two-story, they don't give the same appearance as a four-bedroom colonial would. They're not nearly as tall. They're not nearly as imposing looking. I did look at the plans, there are two houses much further down Samuel on the far side of Garfield, and I don't know if you know this neighborhood, and I don't mean to imply you don't, but I've had a Franklin Township police officer at my door who asked me once, "Are you sure you live in Somerset and not southbound Brook?" It is a neighborhood most people don't know exists there. So the far side of Garfield is the one with an overpass on 287. There are two houses that are very similar looking. However, they have over 20,000 square feet, so they don't look as massive on the property. This house is larger than most of the houses in the neighborhood on a lot that is smaller than most of the houses in the neighborhood. Although it does meet the height requirement, it is 2 full stories, whereas many of the houses in this neighborhood are bi-levels or older 2 stories that are not as large looking. Very few of the houses in the neighborhood have 2-car garages. That just adds a level of the look of the house, the appearance of the house. And all of that really does add to the character of the neighborhood. This house really does not look like the rest, will not look like the rest of the neighborhood. So while it may meet every technical specification, as you've pointed out, it meets it today, it probably won't tomorrow as soon as somebody wants to put a 4x4 shed on it. And while that's not your concern today, it doesn't meet the idea of zoning, which is to have the appearance of the house fit the neighborhood.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Could you raise your right hand, please?
Yes.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
Fred Yanetta, 311 Samuel Place, Somerset.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Yannetta.
Thank you.
I just want to bring, how the heck can I put this? Back in the late 80s, the township had a land sale. I don't know if the board is aware of that. That's when that property sold and a bunch of other properties. At the time, there was a newspaper for the Franklin Township. In that paper and at the land sale, which was here, it stated that there was no guarantee you can build on any of the properties that you bid on. And that property, it's been 35 years or something close to that, and nobody was able to build on it before. And like I said, I don't see the hardship here. I don't even think they're the original purchasers of that property from the township during the land sale. So I mean, I'm not for the hardship variance. I'm against it. And we do have a water problem. I have two sump pumps in my basement because of it. They have no idea. They're probably going to put a basement in that house. You're going to have water problems. I can tell you right from the get-go. I mean, because the water table is very, very high there. Just wanted to bring up my 2 cents here about this.
Thank you.
Yes, my
Could
name
you
is
raise-
Paul New.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please?
Paul New, 521 Jerome Avenue, Somerset. I just had a question. At the at the corner of Jerome Avenue and Samuel Place, right at the end of the road, there's a telephone pole with a light and that has utilities on it. It sounds as if you're going to widen the road, that pole is going to need to be moved, relocated. Has that been considered, and who would be responsible for doing that?
We have not looked at that yet, but obviously, if it does have to be moved, it would be our responsibility to move it, not anybody else's.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. This was raised by the last speaker. He had mentioned that the land was a part of a land sale, possibly in the 80s. Did you,
I checked the deed. It was a straight up deed. I had no deed restrictions for any additional land or anything. That's the first thing I always check.
You're anticipating my question, but just so I can explain why I asked it. There were situations in the past where if the township sold land, there was a deed restriction saying that you can't build it unless it met all zoning requirements.
Correct.
You're saying that
that's
you did
not
that,
it.
you research it, and there is no such deed restriction associated with this piece of land.
That's correct. This is not one of those properties.
Okay, anyone else? Covered it all out there. We'll close to the public. Like to say.
Offer to make the house smaller.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Now, the client, does your client own this property yet, or just under contract to buy it?
She is a contract purchaser.
Right, so they don't own it yet.
They do not own it, but that has no bearing on your decision.
And they don't get the approval, then they won't buy it. Yeah.
But that should not be a basis, and you can ask your counsel for your
Can you ask a
decision.
question? Okay. Because then I don't know if it's considered a hardship.
We cannot hold the status of the ownership of the property against the applicant.
Okay.
Whether or not they're the contract purchaser or the owner makes no difference. And if this case were to be denied and this applicant sues, they're going to bring up questions like that as evidence that the board considered things that were not proper. So if any board member is not in favor of this application, at the time of your vote, please put the reasons for your no vote on the record and make it clear that you are not holding the ownership status of the lot in question against the applicant.
I got one. I just, you said something about the township agreeing to extend the roadway. Who was that? Who's the township in that case?
No, the township is not extending the roadway. The staff report.
To the end of the property line.
The staff report that was generated indicated that the road may have to be widened. We, as a follow-up, contacted the engineering department. The engineering department advised us that we would have to widen it 28 feet wide from the intersection of Samuel to the end of our property. So that was from the township engineer.
And we have that in writing?
No, that was a verbal. Mr. Fisk testified to it. He had that discussion with the township today, and he testified to that under oath.
Okay, so that's incomplete for me, but anyway.
Well, no,
under oath, that's
if
okay.
the board acts in the affirmative on this application, that road improvement requirement would be part of the resolution.
And the engineering department will review the resolution, and it'll be confirmed.
And the other thing about the wetlands determination, how do we do that? Mark?
Well, I mean, they've indicated that they've looked at maps. I mean, but.
Have they, we were asking for a delineation.
Well, that's a different,
You asked for it. I asked for it.
And we agreed to.
I didn't ask for it, I questioned about it. You
asked if it was done, and they answered no.
They've said that they've looked at maps. I'm guessing they looked at the available wetlands mapping from the state, which is not a wetlands delineation.
We-
A
we-
Wetlands, I'm answering the question, Mr. Lanford. Wetlands delineation is done when somebody with proper qualifications walks the site, prepares a map, submits that to the state, and the state indicates whether there the presence or absence of wetlands and associated buffer areas.
Got it. And now I'm listening to testimony from people who live on the street and have expressed over and over and over and over, it gets wetlands and it sits. And it floods basements. Today when I was there, I couldn't back around because people had plywood so that their cars could back around because it was in the underwater the last few days of rain. And so I'm real concerned that this is an incomplete application without the delineation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's incomplete, but I think you may or may not need additional information to make an informed decision.
Well, we've heard testimony from people or comments from people, including one who said he's an engineer or an architect or
Planner.
a planner. Is it unreasonable to ask for a wetlands delineation?
Well, didn't I hear
Seems
Mr.
to be a water issue in the area.
Carol, do you have a comment?
Didn't Mr. Lanford offer to have a professional walk out there and do a preliminary evaluation?
Half hour ago, we agreed to provide a wetlands report.
Okay, but I think that should be submitted to us before we go through the final approval. Based on all the comments we heard and the comment from my own member who went there and saw cars using plywood to go down the street there. We have a right to get that kind of report before.
Is that unreasonable?
Is that correct?
Yep.
Well, the board needs to decide whether or not they need to have that information before voting on the application, or whether or not you are satisfied making that a condition of an approval.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I will ask that this matter be carried so we can provide to you before you vote, even though I don't think it's necessarily required, a wetlands report. So we will provide that to the board to assist them in making that decision. We will also take into consideration some of the requests of the board members and perhaps look at reducing the size of the house. And I want to make it clear that the variances that we are seeking have nothing to do with the size of the house. The house meets all the zone requirements, but notwithstanding that, we will take a look at it and perhaps come back with a smaller footprint for the house.
How much time do you need?
Since I'm coming back here on June 20th, why don't we carry this to June? I don't know what else you have on the calendar for June 20th. I don't want to overburden you.
We have, well, two are yours.
What else is mine?
Engel, Berman, and Odin. Those are two large applications.
Odin may not be ready by June 20th. And why don't we carry this to June 20th, and we may or may not be ready by June 20th also, but at least it gives us a target date to shoot for. We won't be ready by June 6th. I think that's too tight.
All right, unless there's objections here, we'll carry this till June 20th. And there will be no further notification.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question of the board as well. Since there were some questions raised by the public about stormwater, I mean, typically we put those off the building permit. Would you want staff to do a review? There has been a design of the dry well. To have staff do a review of the proposed stormwater and dry well and amend our report?
Yeah, and they did testify that dry well was, you had conversations about it, but you didn't have a confirmation that it's approved yet, right? That's what I, so that'll be ready the next time too, right?
And I would just ask Mr. Healy that any subsequent reports are, be forwarded to me also, please.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you want to? All right, June 20th.
Thank you.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.